So, for the last week, my rig has been inside Cooler Master's HAF 500. You might have noticed this case in my last video, and today we have to look at it. Jumping right in, the packaging was pretty standard. The case comes in an old school cartoon and it is protected in some nice polystyrene brackets. But the specific unit which Cooler Master sent me had no accessories box in it. Now this is going to be a pain, but I cannot help it. Overall, I'm neither disappointed with the package nor impressed with it. A 6.5 of 10. Alright, where shall we start from? Now this is a big black case, and Cooler Master also sells a white version of this. That one looks kind of better. Okay, so now let's go for the chief marketing feature, the hard drive cage fan. Yes, now this looks old school. Some really old cases from the past used to have this until hard drive cage fans just disappeared, and now it is back. Why? We don't know, but it is just there to add extra cooling to your GPU. You know, high airflow, right? Now Cooler Master has really modernized the front I/O panel to quite an extent. It's all USB 3.2, a hybrid audio port and USB-C port, and the rest are your power and reset buttons. Now I like the front panel. It is a solid metal mesh with some really nice and racy curves, and it even has an embedded HAF logo in it. This ensures enough airflow, and cleaning such single layer mesh panels is also quite easy. The case has a single tempered glass panel which is secured by two clips, and it can also optionally be screwed by an additional thumb screw. The other side panel, however, is held by two captive screws and it slides off in a very old school way. I mean, this mounting mechanism is fine, it will work, but if you have a huge cable clutter in the back, this might just become a huge problem. Now, the rear panel is a direct copy of the H500. Now, this case is based on the H500 and it does borrow a lot of inspiration from the 5-year-old case, and that makes this case look out of fashion too. Let me give you a few examples. The HAF 500 is selling for around 10,000 rupees or around $135 in the Indian market. Now, that is not cheap for a computer case. And now let us have a look at how the competition looks like. The Fantex P400A, a solid case with a great design but much cheaper. The Lively O11 Dynamic Mini, another great case with a huge focus on aesthetics, but it almost costs the same. Then we have Antec's P120 Crystal, an O11 ripoff but much cheaper and a really great case. Standing in this market, Cooler Master has to offer this old school looking robust design. Now this isn't a bad design, but it is way behind the current market trends, and this might hurt its sales. And coming to the word robust, this case isn't badly built. It has metal everywhere and I really like that. That is until you take the side panel off and try to take this out. This is the PSU shroud, and you can completely take this out and use the case without one. Let us count how many things you can take off in this case. Okay, now this shroud is made out of plastic. Now I do not have anything to complain about the material choice, but when you compare it to the all metal build of this case, kind of looks inconsistent. Now right beside this is the hard drive cage, which also has a fan on top of it. This hard drive cage can hold up to 2 hard drives, and that is a decent number. And this cage is quite easy to use. The hard drive caddies are held with a single tap and they come off quite easily. You can also completely remove this hard drive cage from your system and make room for a liquid reservoir in case you run a custom liquid cooled system. Moving to the top panel is removable too. You can take it off, mount your radiator in it and place it back in. The takeoff meter is at 3 now. Plus, you can also take off the 3 side panels, and that brings the meter to 6, and the case reduces to this, an almost open air test bench. Great job, Cooler Master, you have made the perfect reviewer's all-purpose case. Okay, moving to other bigger things, this case has 2 very big 200mm fans in the front. Now these add a very unique look to the case and it helps to differentiate it from other offerings in the market. However, Cooler Master's implementation of the 200mm fans is a bit off. A third of the large fans is blocked by the front panel metal plate, and this makes installing 3 120mm fans in its place a better idea. And what we can infer from this is that this case was probably designed to house 120mm fans, but Cooler Master was like, whatever, we will put in 200mm fans. You can better put in the 200mm fans in the top panel, which luckily supports 2 200mm fans unlike the H500, and at least a third of the airflow would not be blocked by a solid metal plate in this case. case. Now the design of the 200mm implementation is a complete carryover from the H500. Now since this case is completely based on that design, we cannot complain but just say that Cooler Master did not improvise on their formula. Now both of these fans are connected by 3-pin ARGB headers, so you can completely control their looks, but on the downside it is only connected by 3-pin PWM headers, so you cannot control their speed and they just do full speed all of the time. Now Cooler Master also includes a 120mm fan in the rear, their single flow 120 ARGB, and this is a nice fan and I can rate them highly. Okay, now before I continue, almost 90% of you people do not subscribe. Now if you think my content helps you or at least just enjoy them, do consider hitting that red button. Now this case supports up to E80X motherboards up to 12 by 14.1 inches. You might need to take the hard drive cage fan out or even the cable management cover. Now this feels kind of weird because Cooler Master has to give up on its chief marketing feature just to accommodate larger motherboards. Oh, and talking about cable management, this case has a 3cm gap in the rear to manage and tuck all of your cables. This is already quite decent, you might not have any problem with this, but Cooler Master also includes a cable management cover in the front to just hide all of your cables. I mean, it is unnecessary, but I like the attention to detail. It just imparts a cleaner look overall. And talking about the cables, this case has a fair amount of cable clutter. Now you get 3 fans with this case, so expect quite a lot of cables, but it is nothing out of the boundary. The USB 3 cables have been bundled into one, so that's quite neat. The USB-C port has its own cable and nothing other than the absolute necessary are included. Also, just behind the motherboard lies 2 SSD trays. The mounting mechanism is quite old school, but it is quite simple. And talking about accessories, this case does include a PWM and RGB controller hub, and that is quite dope. This controller has 4 fan headers and 4 RGB headers, and it is connected by a SATA power connection. Now the SATA power cable is quite long and you won't have any problem cable managing them. Okay, now if you ask me for a score, 7 of 10. Yes, this case does miss out on a lot of points. Yes, it does look a bit old school, but Cooler Master is an experienced case maker and thus you won't ever expect complete garbage from this company. Alright, so let's build a system in this case. Now I can easily say this was one of the easiest cases to build with. It is a huge box, so you have ample space to work with, and this simplifies the building experience by quite a margin. Plus the insane modularity of this case also adds brownie points to this experience. But there are a few down points. To start things, if you have a large motherboard like anything above 10.5 inches, the hard drive cage fan will block your board. Cooler Master then requires you to take off the hard drive cage, which is absolutely fine, but it exposes the PSU shroud and all the cable clutter. If you have color coordinated PSU cables like black with black or white with white, it is probably going to look fine. But if you're caught in a condition like me, it's game over. This case does not have a wall that separates the PSU cable from the rest of the case, and that is kind of weird. And also the PSU shroud only has one hole, so if you want to take the shroud off after you have completed building your PC, it is going to become quite a headache. Oh, and also if your SATA cables are daisy chained in this very conservative manner, and if you try to power your hard drives using this, the case isn't going to be happy with it. For me, the second hard drive kept slopping off, and although I do not have a problem with this, it made mounting the tempered glass side panel very difficult. Okay, now this brings me to the cable clearance. This also is a carryover from the H500, and how am I supposed to plug in 4 cables to this without damaging something, Cooler Master? At this point, it just seems like every carryover feature from the H500 is making this case a bit worse. But these problems are not big. You can work past them, but at almost $150, you do not expect such mess ups from a product. Now building in this case was still a great experience. I'm giving this a 7.5 of 10. Okay, now this case does have a robust look to it. It is not your daily sauce that you would see in the market every day, and I think it looks quite great. For anyone who is looking to build a functional looking setup, this case might be it. And the old school looking frame just adds to the overall theme. But although I am just nitpicking at this point, the front panel cables have not been carefully routed. They just hang behind the front fans and it kind of looks weird. Now you can still use some brute force and route this cable so that they just don't hang out of nowhere, but just be careful not to damage anything. Also, the LEDs on the 200mm fans have not been diffused and they just stare at you, but this is not a deal breaker. Overall, this is a solid looking case and I love the functional vibe of it. A solid 8 of 10. Alright, time to test how hot this case is. Now, I have a high hopes for this. This case has high airflow right in its name, which means that it has something special in terms of airflow. And yep, the results reflect in the test. With the cage fan in the horizontal position, the temperatures do not look shabby when you compare them to the open air number. When you flip the fan up by 45 degrees, which is how Cooler Master marketed this product, the GPU temperatures fall significantly. Now, although the CPU temps are slightly affected, the results are within their margin of error. If you, however, decide to air cool your CPU, the results may be noticeable. Now, when I pushed the cage fan up as much as possible without knocking the card over, well, the results had almost no change. I mean, the difference is almost negligible. However, if you take out the hard drive cage completely from the case, the temperatures do fall by quite a margin. This is because most of the air the 200mm fans pull in isn't getting blocked by the hard drive cage anymore. Now, taking the front panel off while keeping the side panel on gives us even better results. And taking the side panel off while keeping the front panel on brings the graphics card temperatures to their lowest. But all of these differences aren't far apart, and when you compare these results with the open air test numbers, the difference is very acceptable. The thermal performance is overly good and I'm giving this an 8.5 of 10. This is one of the best cases in the market in terms of thermal performance and it does live up to its name. Now this brings me to the value for money aspect. This case sells for around $167 for the black and $170 for the white version in the USA. The Indian pricing, however, is much better. You can find the black version for around 9400 rupees and the white version goes for around 9900 rupees. Now that is a solid $40 discount. At this price point, the best cases are Antec's P120 Crystal, Dynalee's LandCool 2 Mesh, Corsair's 4000X and Fractal's Mesh IC. Now all of these are great cases and the HAF does have a few points to lose. The most apparent point is that this case does not look as sleek as the other modern competitors. Now in India, the pricing has become much better. Even a few days ago, the case was selling for over 10,000 points. But now that it has come under the 10,000 mark, I think we can give some justification to it. But in order to make me recommend this case, it has to sell for around 7,000 to 8,000 rupees. In fact, Cooler Master was originally designing to be case to be sold at that price point, but they just gave up on that decision. And the US pricing is just atrocious. At that price, better get something else. Now, this is not a bad case, don't get me wrong, but the pricing of it is just way off its worth. Okay, so that wraps it up. We have a score of 7 of 10. Cybertech Talk Silver Award. This case did impress me in as many aspects as it disappointed me in. Is it a good case? Yes. Do I recommend it? No. If you have already bought it, you're probably going to be fine, but if you're looking for recommendations before buying one, look at other options. There are loads of options that look both modern and are more value for money than this thing. Okay, and check out my latest video in which I tested an insanely good air cooler. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want more content like this.